So as we go through the second chapter of Yevamot, we're getting into definitions of permitted and forbidden marriages, but also issues of propriety and impropriety. And we dealt in the 8th Mishnah with someone who was claimed to have a relationship with a married woman, Hanitan al Eshet Ish, someone who's suspected, or this should be more than suspected, someone who has a reasonable degree of suspicion about a relationship with a married woman. And we learned in the 8th Mishnah that if she divorces, he's not allowed to marry her. It wouldn't be, there's some lack of propriety there. It would substantiate the allegations that he did have an illicit relationship with her before she divorced. And in the 9th Mishnah, the text picks up this theme with a statement which reminds us of the first Mishnah in Gittin. The first Mishnah in Gittin deals with someone bringing a bill of divorce from abroad. Hamevi get mi medinat hayam. And our Mishnah in Yevamot begins in exactly the same way. Hamevi get mi medinat hayam. Someone who brings a bill of divorce from a country beyond the sea. Medinat hayam, some place out there, some foreign land. Medinat hayam, the country beyond the sea. So we don't know that we can't see the husband. We don't know much about the conditions in which this bill of divorce was written. Did the Bet Din know how to write a divorce properly? Did they know that a get has to be written specifically for the woman in question? Was it properly witnessed? We don't know anything about this. And halacha has brought down in Gittin that the person who brings the get must say, and it's repeated in our Mishnah, someone who brings a bill of divorce from a country beyond the sea and states, it was written in my presence and it was signed in my presence. If we don't have this testimony, then the bill of divorce is not married. It's not valid. The bill of divorce is not valid. But our Mishnah goes further and it says, Lo yisa et ishto. He shall not marry his wife referring to the wife of the man, referring to the wife who's just been divorced, the wife of the person who writes the get. In other words, that the person who testifies to the validity of the get is acceptable as a witness if the woman wants to marry anybody else. But he's not acceptable as a witness if he wishes to marry the woman himself. He is considered to have a conflict of interest. And the Mishnah then continues, mate, he died. This means that the individual testified, he died. Haragtiv, I killed him. This is an extraordinary statement. The man is testifying, I killed the husband. Haragnuhu, we killed him. And the Mishnah continues in the same vein. Lo yisa et ishto. He can't marry the woman in question. Ishto, his wife, referring to the wife of the man, referring to the wife of the previous husband. Why not? Well, again, there are questions about incentives, I guess. Just as we can't trust the integrity of someone who's testifying about, he's testifying about the integrity of the bill of divorce. If he wants to marry the woman in question, maybe he killed, maybe we can't trust his testimony as to whether the husband is alive. Haragtiv, I killed him. That's a really interesting question. If he's a murderer, do we trust his testimony? And the Gemara finds eventually that someone is not allowed to incriminate himself in the witness box. Not so much according to the modern, I think the Fifth Amendment prevents being asked to self-incriminate, but there's an idea. It's a classic idea in laws of testimony that evidence is not acceptable from a relative. So, for example, your brother cannot testify against you in court, or your sister cannot. Well, that sister doesn't relate, particularly in this case. Your brother can't testify against you in court. And the Gemara finds that a person is considered to be his own relative. A person is considered to be his own relative. Therefore, his testimony about himself is not acceptable. So the Gemara finds that when he says, I killed him, actually, we will not accept his testimony about himself being a murderer, but we will accept his testimony about the husband being dead. Haragnuhu, we killed him. Similarly, we will accept his testimony that the individual in question is dead, but we still rule lo yisa et ishto. The person bringing the testimony cannot marry the woman in question. We might accept his testimony that the wife's husband is dead, so she can marry anybody else, but she cannot marry the witness. And Rabbi Yehuda is going to disagree. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, haragtiv lo tinaseh ishto. Rabbi Yehuda says, if he testifies I killed him, his wife the woman may not marry at all. Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yehuda will not accept evidence from the murderer. He can't disassociate the criminality of the murder from the integrity of the witness. And similarly, although Rabbi Yehuda says, haragnuhu, we killed him, if the man testifies we killed him, tinaseh ishto, if he testifies we killed him, Rabbi Yehuda would say actually she can marry. I think on the grounds that by saying we killed him, he's not admitting to being the murderer himself. The halacha, by the way, does not go according to Rabbi Yehuda. If he testifies I killed him or we killed him, he can't. The woman can't marry the witness, but she can marry another person. What about other kinds of impropriety? And, we read a lot today about the dangers of, and the transference that can arise and the dangers of relationships between leaders of the community and their congregants. And it's something which I think in probably all modern rabbinical schools, rabbis are told to beware of and to be careful of. And the Mishnah, it's very interesting. I mean, there's a story about a relationship between Rabbi Meir and a congregant, which we might learn on another occasion. And it's very interesting that the Mishnah in Yevamot addresses this exactly. Chacham she'asar et ishto baneder or al ba'ala harei lo yisa'ena. A sage. So we're talking about a leader of the community who has pronounced a woman forbidden to her husband because of a vow. So she has made a vow that she's forbidden to him. Her husband has not been willing or not been able to overturn her vow. The Chacham has not been willing or not been able to overturn her vow. And therefore, she is forbidden to him. And the halacha is that after 1 or 2 months, he has to give her a divorce. After he's given her divorce, can he marry her? Lo yisa'ena. The sage, the person that was involved in essentially in the train of events that led to the divorce, cannot marry the woman in question. Just like the witness who witnessed the get, there's a question of lack of propriety here, question of incentives. We don't allow it. Me'ina or she'achatza b'fanav yisa'ena. If she made a declaration of refusal, this is a minor who's married off by a relative below the age of 12. At the age of 12, she can make a declaration before the Bet Din that she refuses to enter that marriage. And then she's no longer married. She's free. Or shechaltza b'fanav, maybe she performed chalitza in his presence, as we've learned in the tractate of Yevamot. Yisa'ena, at this point, he is allowed to marry her. A member of the Bet Din can marry someone who performed chalitza in front of the Bet Din, mipnei shehu t'nei Bet Din, because it's a requirement of the court. The refusal or the chalitza is a requirement of the court. The it's not considered to be a personal, let's say, a personal act of the dayan. And all of these situations. So someone comes from over the water. There's a witness that he's died, or perhaps the witness killed him, or perhaps the witness was part of a group who killed him. He must not marry the witness. But the Mishnah concludes, if the witness already was married, and then the witness's wife died, and the same would apply to the Chacham, by the way, mutarot linaseh lahem. At that point, he can marry. There seems to be some assumption, even though we've learned frequently in the Mishnah of Yevamot that it was permissible for men to have two wives. There seems to be some assumption at this point in the Mishnah that it was not common, that it was not done. Someone who had a wife would not commit perjury in order to take on another wife. That's the basic assumption of this part of the Mishnah. All of these people, they had wives, but then the wife died. So when they gave the evidence, or when they were unable to release the vow, they were married. And then their wife died. Mutarot linaseh lahem. They are permitted to marry them. Somehow we're less anxious about impropriety at this point. And along the same lines, vechulam shenis'u le'acharim. So, and maybe the woman married somebody else. Nit almanu or nit garshu, and then she was widowed, or then she was divorced. Again, mutarot linaseh lahem. The witness or the chacham can at this point marry them. The assumption is that someone is not going to commit perjury for a woman who he can't marry until after her husband is going to die or divorce. And they're all permitted to their children or their brothers, i.e., again, the assumption seems to be that someone will not commit perjury for the sake of their brother or their children. And the Rambam just gives us a sense as to where we're coming from here. He says, Kulam im kanas lo yotzi. With all these situations, and these are, for example, the situation, for example, perhaps someone who made someone who has witnessed that somebody died or killed, or we killed him. In all of these situations, vechulam im kanas lo yotzi. If he did marry her, we don't make him send her away. Chutz me'eshet ish. Other than with respect to a married woman. In other words, if there's a suggestion of impropriety with a married woman, al hatzad sheniskarnu bameh shekadam, just as we learned in the previous Mishnayot, where we learned that if someone is suspected of a relationship with a married woman and then he marries her, we actually force him to give her a divorce.